Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be getting started with a webinar in just a minute. Let everybody finish coming in, and then we're going to jump right into the content. See if I can just get this PDF a little bit larger. Yeah, that looks good. So what we're going to be using today as a source of the presentation is called a website owner's manual. It's kind of the tasks that should be going on an ongoing basis to ensure a properly functioning website that is secure and up to date and has all your, a lot of the things that website owners don't even ever know should be going on. So that's partly what's going to drive the conversation today. I'm going to share over the course of the presentation links and tools that we use for our own clients, and that our clients, if they wanted to get a deep dive into it, could be using themselves as well. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the services that Compete Now provides. Some clients just don't want to dive into it, but for the ones that do, this is a great presentation to show kind of how we do it and what we suggest. And then for the ones that don't want to do it, but want to kind of have an idea of what's going on, it's just nice to see a little bit of a walkthrough. So with that, I'll share my screen, and then we'll get running through it. All right, so this is the owner's manual. This is an interesting page. So this is almost something that every company probably should have on hand. It definitely never it ceases to amaze me at even at really large international companies how some of these fields are unknown. So this is definitely a part of website ownership that should be anywhere. There's probably more secure ways of storing it. I mean, it might be something you print. It might be something you keep on, if you have like a SharePoint or something, or a Dropbox that people can't access, but, because it does have password fields. But this is just a good document to maintain and ensure is up to date. Hopefully you know the website address, but maybe you have multiple websites, the login URL for WordPress and the username and password. Who's hosting the site? That's often one that a lot of people will, when I ask who's hosting the site, will kind of like, they'll be like, oh, I don't really know actually. I need to go dig that up. And then unfortunately, sometimes they either can't figure it out or they can't contact the person who's hosting it, and it could be under their own account. And then you're kind of stuck trying to figure out what to do next. The server IP isn't it's more of like a DNS thing, but that's just part of the template. Domain name registrar is another really important one, where there'll be a lot of times clients will have a hosting provider and not realize that the domain name registration is separate from hosting. And then it's happened many times where clients will let their domain names expire. Usually they expire and they're able to renew them again before the end of the grace period, so they don't lose them. But there have been times where clients let domain names expire and somebody actually purchases it, and with the intent to make them, extort them to buy it back from them at a crazy price. DNS, those are domain name settings, record settings, and sometimes the DNS is hosted with the hosting provider. Sometimes it's hosted with the registrar, and that's where you would want to have some details about that, because if you ever hire an IT company or somebody that needs to make modifications to the DNS records, they're going to want that information. So having that as part of your technical details document is an important thing to have available. And then also knowing who's hosting your emails, another important thing. So a lot of the times, more so nowadays with most companies, even small ones, your email is going to be hosted with Microsoft Office 365 or Google G Suite. So if you ever have issues with either one of those things, you want to have a record of who to contact for support, because typically your web guy or your web designer who's hosting your website is not hosting it and is not going to be answering questions pertaining to email issues for the most part. Content delivery network, that could just be who's ever controlling where your content delivery network is just a network that you use to host your DNS to make it so that the website is loading from a closer location to that person's location. So if you are using that, we recommend Cloudflare for that purpose. It works really well, and there's also some nice security features that come with Cloudflare. The one that is the most nice with Cloudflare is protects you from DDoS attacks. You don't see those too often anymore with WordPress sites, or at least I don't. Maybe it's because we use Cloudflare, but that's just where there would be a bot constantly sending traffic to a domain name, and with the intent to use up all the resources and take the website down. That's what the CDN. And if your hosting provider doesn't provide a free SSL, which they should, you can get a free SSL through Cloudflare. So that's also a nice little feature. For this webinar, everybody's going to be WordPress is the note, but if you had a different content management system, you have that. And then this is an important section here just to keep a record of. What is the name of your theme that your website is using, and what are any premium or paid plugins? Because those premium or paid plugins that are installed on your WordPress site typically only have about the license is good for a year, and then after that you need to keep renewing, otherwise you don't get access to the updated version of those plugins. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that in one of the later slides, but that can create a lot of issues. And then this is usually a tough subject, because a lot of web designers will buy a license to build a website, but then they're not necessarily, unless you're paying them to continue maintaining the site, they're not going to keep buying the renewal on that license every year. And you as a website owner might not even know that you need to pay for those plugins for those licenses to continue updating them. So having that as part of your document, it helps to make sure that those are getting renewed and everything's staying current, so that your plugins are staying up to date. So this is just a very basic idea, and I can share this document with the viewers of the presentation today as well, just so that you have it. You might want to fill it out. It's pretty basic. It's more so just having a one place to go and find all this information, and it'll be helpful for you to remember where everything is. And if if you're in a company and you have a role there, and maybe you don't not planning on being there forever, or just in case you aren't there forever, this definitely makes it a lot easier to pass the document on to the next person, so that they're not kind of scrambling trying to figure out what's where. This is just a little bit of a maintenance schedule for websites, and this is just part of the document. I wouldn't necessarily say all these tasks have to be weekly or even monthly. We have a lot of our clients on a quarterly rotation for some of these tasks. Some are daily, some are more frequent. For example, I'll give a little bit of commentary on that as we go through it. But daily tasks, these are kind of more so automated if you use the right plugins. And I'm going to start sharing my screen and showing some of those plugins that we recommend as we go through this. Uptime monitoring, that's just an automated program that actually pings your website and checks to see if it's up. And if the site ever goes down, you get an email notification saying, your website is currently down. You try to go and see what happens. So that's actually really useful, because if your site goes down, instead of you having to notice it, or a client having to tell you that the site is down, you get a notification, so you can jump in there and see what happened. There's also security monitoring that should be going on constantly, checking for vulnerable plugins, checking for any kind of suspicious activity, like failed login attempts if somebody's trying to brute force hack your website. Those are just some of the examples of security monitoring. And then also website and database backups. And I'd have that one as my first reference. This is a really good plugin for backups. It's called Updraft Plus. And the thing that's nice about this plugin is it not only backups your website and is reliable, you can configure the settings of the plugin to send the backups of the website to a third-party source. And you can see these are some of the ones they have on here. You could send it to Google Drive, Dropbox, Amazon Web Services, a local kind of download. So this is really, really useful. I recommend setting it up so that it'll send those remote site backups on some kind of scheduled basis. I wouldn't do daily. I think you'd fill up your storage pretty quickly doing daily. You can schedule it so that it only keeps 6 on hand at a time. we do daily backups with ours, but for most businesses and websites, I think you can have an idea for if you're constantly updating your site week to week, then maybe you would do a week to week, or you would do a daily. But for most small businesses, updating the site, backing up the site once a week is sufficient. And sending them to the remote third-party site is also important, just because if you ever have a major issue with your website and you can't access it, or what actually, one story for us is there was a client who thought we were hosting their website and we weren't. We were doing maintenance on the site, but we weren't actually the host. So they let their website hosting account expire and the site was completely deleted. Luckily, we did have backups of that website on Amazon Web Services because we were using our backup, and we were able to then take over hosting of that website and restore it, and it was all worked out in the end of the day. But that's just a extreme example of if we had been storing all those backups on the server that the site was hosted, the site would have been gone. So that's what we recommend for there. This is a plugin that's just awesome for, or this is a website. This is the plugin. Securi is really good for security. They do activity auditing, file integrity monitoring to see if there's been any malicious files, remote malware scanning, and security hardening. So that'll add measures onto the site for making sure people can't try to log into the site. And what they usually would do for a brute force hack is have a bot run through the site and constantly guess hundreds and hundreds, thousands of passwords until they finally get in, and this plugin will defend against that. One thing I really like about security is one of the most common ways that websites get hacked is really through vulnerable plugins, and it's usually a certain version of a plugin that's vulnerable. And this plugin actually will monitor that and send you an email notification to notify you if you have a plugin on your website and a version of that plugin that's been found to be vulnerable, so that you can typically log into the site, update that plugin to the most recent version, and prevent an issue with that vulnerability being exploited on your website. They also have a section on their site that shows any plugins that are coming out that have found to be vulnerable. I'll actually search that now. I should have that tab up too. Security WordPress. Let me see if I can pull that up, just because it is a nice little. If I can't find it quickly, I'll just need to install it. List. I don't have to use it as much now because I just get email notification if any of our clients have an issue with that. But there's a whole bunch of lists that you can go to that show those things. That Security also does have a paid program. The free plugin works well for just general scanning, but for $200 a year, they do have a automated constant malware removal, hack cleanup if that ever happens, and then also scanning. They scan every 12 hours the website for any malware or issues with the website. So there are some good features, and that's even in the basic one. And then so that just works well. And if anything ever was added, they would help clean that up. So that's also works well. Back to the plan. So that kind of covers the uptime monitoring, the security monitoring, and the website and database backups. For uptime monitoring, we've actually used Pingdom. Works pretty well. That's a good website. I haven't had to use it as much since we use Cloudflare for so many clients, and that will also does automatic, uptime monitoring. Will tell you if your server's not reachable or if your website's down. This is the Pingdom uptime monitoring. I'll show you this one. Yeah, so this is a good tool that will help monitor the website and let you know if it ever goes down. And the price is fairly low too. I think it was, Let's see what it was. It's less than $5 a month or so. So that's a pretty good tool. They're hiding the price right now, apparently, because they wanted you to do the trial. But I definitely endorse the uptime monitoring, because that's, if your site ever does go down for a reason, you want to be the first to know about it, not clients, so that you can fix it quickly. Other tasks, like I said before, we do this on more of like a quarterly basis for a lot of clients. For high traffic websites and high functional sites, and e-commerce sites, sometimes we'll do monthly. But you do want to do the plugin and theme updates, especially the plugins, and making sure the plugins are up to date and verifying that they're compatible with the most recent version of WordPress. WordPress has rolled out significant updates most recently to jQuery and things like that. So there have been plugins that have been having issues with the newer version of WordPress, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for them to catch up. So that's something that you would want to monitor and check the documentation on those plugins before updating, because you might want to skip a WordPress update or defer it for a month or two until those plugins keep up to keep your site functioning at a high level. One thing on plugin and theme updates, and this goes back to the premium plugin question. If you have premium plugins on your website, these could be plugins that are on there to add in a higher level functionality that you would get from a free plugin that's just in the WordPress repository. Those plugins are important to have those licenses up to date and installed on your site, because typically what those ones end up getting hacked at more often, it seems like, because they'll have new versions of plugins come out, but those aren't really automatic in terms of notifying you if there is an update for that plugin, because it's not part of just the WordPress repository. So you could update all your plugins, and that'll just update all the plugins that can be updated automatically, and it's going to leave the older versions of those plugins on your site, and those are what can become very vulnerable over time, because people don't even realize that there are updates available for those plugins until something breaks, or there's a hack or something like that. Something that probably should be done weekly, if not daily, is just a visual inspection of your site. So just look at it. There's some people that actually utilize their site at a high level and do a lot of blogging and content marketing. They're by default doing a visual inspection constantly. But if you're a business that doesn't typically need to look at your site for any reason, or it's not highly active, aside from doing all these maintenance tasks, just looking at it every now and then and making sure everything's in the right place and something didn't get messed up really doesn't hurt. Otherwise, months and months will pass, and then you'll look back and just wonder how much business could have been lost because of a simple word being out of place, or photo being broken, image being broken, anything like that. So a visual inspection of the site, even if you're not, ideally you're doing these other things, but even if you weren't doing these other things, just keeping an eye on the site. Because if you're not having a web company or some company monitoring your site and doing proactive tasks like the above, nobody's going to know until, and a client or a prospect's only going to tell you about that you have an issue with the site, typically if it's down or there's some major issue like that, aside from just saying like, wow, your site's all poorly formatted. They're just going to assume that, you don't care for some reason, which is not what you want. Monthly tasks. So this is a fun one: monitoring traffic and search engine rankings. This is another thing that a lot of clients typically don't do or ever look at, and I wanted to share a couple of the tools that we use. This first one is called SEM Rush. This is more of a premium subscription product, but I think if you have a free account, you can at least get this level of information on like a smaller amount. So I just put in WordPress.com, and you can see here it shows you the authority score of the website, which is just an accumulation of, how many keywords is your website ranking for, how many backlinks referring domain names are coming to your site, and that gives you 84 is that's like a national really high. I mean, it is WordPress.com, so it's a huge site. So most businesses are a lot lower than that. But working to increase your domain's authority score will help with your rankings. This is a cool chart because it can show you over time if how much organic traffic is growing, and then it shows you how much your organic keywords are growing. So I can see that this site is ranked for 586,000 keywords, 23,000 of which are in the top 3 search results. So it's interesting. Their traffic is, last year kind of went down a little bit and then had stayed steady, but their traffic is actually going up. So maybe they're not ranking for more keywords, but they're ranking higher for the keywords that they were ranking. So that's just an interesting. It's always fun to look at this report, and then you can look at what keywords your website is actually ranking for on Google. And another tool that we use to check the rankings is also the Google Search Console. So this is a really nice tool. You can see the different performance of your website, how many total clicks you're getting. It's by default in a 3-month view. So you can kind of see over the course of that. You can then see, this is also a way to check for broken links. So you can see if you have pages with errors on the coverage. So that's a nice thing. So like my site actually does have one. So that was something that I was checking out, and I left it as an error for now, so we could at least show an example. So I have a 404 error on my page. It tells me what the URL is. So that page must have been renamed or changed. I don't know why it's a need-help website. So what I'm just going to do is create a 301 redirect and fix that error. But that's just and then you can also validate it that it's done, and that'll get you fixed up with Google so that you're not getting that. Other things you can see in Google Search Console are the queries that your website is coming up for. So I can kind of see these are the different things that that people are clicking on my website for. Can I use Google Images on my site? I got like 30 clicks for that. WordPress rotating images. And then you can also see kind of the different pages that are getting the most clicks to your site. So this old blog that we have about Google Images has always been crazy. And no, you can't use Google Images on your website, so don't do that. Stick with stock, stick with original images, because if you do use Google Images on your website, it is possible that you're going to get a demand letter from Getty Images or something like that. So it's best to play it safe and don't use Google Images on your site. So that's just Google Search Console. So this is another fun place to go and just play around and kind of get an idea for how the website's ranking and what words, and then it also will give you an idea for the impressions. And then you can do some more searches and look at different queries to see, queries containing like Beverly. I'll put in like my office's location. And then when I put that in, I can see that these are some of the words I'm getting impressions for that include the word Beverly. So if you were a Boston-based business, you might just put Boston and get an idea for what words you're ranking for. So I got like web design Beverly, and haven't been getting the clicks on the website, but I do get the clicks on my map page at least, so that's good. Now coming back to here, that's just a quick run through on some of the general search and SEO tasks that you can monitor. And that should be done typically monthly, because if you look at it too much, you might drive yourself crazy and keep going off off course with whatever SEO strategy you've decided to focus on. Cleaning the database is part of a caching plugin you can use. Cleaning the database usually consists of clearing out post revisions and things like that can bog the site down. Testing loading time, we use 2 different sites. There's GT Metrics and Google Page Speed Insights, and both of those will give you good tips on how fast or not fast your website is loading and tips for improvement. So I'll put my site in to GT Metrics and then just give you a little bit of an idea of how that looks. So let that load. And one note, waiting for this. These tools for page speed are really good at giving you ideas for improvement to make your site load faster. But there are, I believe there are two, in lot say there are 2 sides. There's page speed from running it through this tool, and there's page speed from a visual inspection. So if you go to your website and you click around and you do it during different times of the day, does the site seem fast or does it seem slow? That's perceived, and that's going to have an impact on conversions through your site. This tool is going to give you tips to make it better, and it's also going to give you an idea for what you need to improve because page speed is an SEO ranking factor. So if your site does not rank well, usually page speed is one of the things you want to fix, because that's one of the factors of many that goes into your general SEO. And I've been told it's more so it's really more so a tiebreaker. So if you're ranking for the same keyword with 10 other sites, if your site is the 10th on the list, it could be because of page speed. So this just gives you, so we spent a lot of time on this on our recent redesign, and we're getting an A. So this is what you want to see. And then as you scroll down, you'll get any idea. So the thing they're telling us we could do better is serving static assets with a better cache policy. So that's something that we'll work on to try to inch our page up a little bit. And then it says that our homepage is loading 3.2 seconds. So it was a little bit slower on that one. Like to see that more like 1.8 seconds, but 3 seconds is usually okay for most sites, and loads pretty quickly. And then we can see the difference. So that's running through the page speed tool. And then when we do go to our site, you can see that it's loads pretty quickly. All right, and that's page speed insights. Speaking of page speed, this is one that you want to evaluate your host, because if you have a host like WP Engine or SiteGround or some of those others, they have actually built-in caching. So this would be redundant with that and even cause a conflict. But if you're on one of the other, any other host, many other hosts don't have it built in. If you're on like Bluehost, HostGator, GoDaddy, hopefully not GoDaddy, hopefully not some of those other ones I said too, but definitely not GoDaddy. But if you are on one of those hosts, you are going to want a plugin like WP Optimize. This plugin is by far the best caching and page and just speed plugin that not many other plugins we've used you install on the site and activate the basic settings, and it actually makes a visible difference in the actual load time. This plugin probably is not going to have a big impact on page speed insights or GT metrics, because those are just measuring best practices of page speed, and caching's only one of them. But for your perceived page load and kind of helping to get more conversions through your site and making your site feel fast, this plugin has been like amazing. So that's the plugin that we recommend for WP Optimize for budget hosts, and just wanted to share that. And then just other than all those things, checking for Search Console errors, we did kind of talk about. Broken links is kind of the same thing with the errors. That's really the main error you're looking for in Search Console, or broken links. Other than that, this might be more frequent depending on the size of the company, but you want to review your entire WordPress setup, plugins that can be removed if they're no longer needed, or replaced if there are better options available. Reviewing content throughout the entire site. For most companies, that can be an annual task. For others, it's quarterly, but just making sure that you don't have out-of-date content on the site. That's important to keep information up to date. And then I always recommend going in and seeing what the status is on the licenses of plugins. Do you need to renew your domain name? Is it going to expire soon? I would say just go in and renew it for multiple years. And then same thing for hosting. Make sure credit cards are all up to date and things like that. And also when you're renewing the hosting and domain, double check the contact information. Just make sure that the contact information is up to date. So if it ever were to get close to an expiration, make sure it's an email address that's actually going to be a valid one that gets that up to date. And depending on your domain registrar, if you don't verify your email, they can take your site down. There was a fairly decent sized company that their domain name got locked and deactivated simply because the owner, the contact information for the domain was out of date. So the registrar was sending emails to that saying, you must click this link to confirm that this is the correct contact information. Your domain would be locked. Nobody, of course, got that email. And then, next thing you know, there's the website's down. And since the domain was deactivated, I think it was 18 employees in the company, all their emails were deactivated and broken for that time. So that was quite a disaster for such a simple task. So this is just part of that template I'm going to send out. This is just putting in the name and contact information for who's doing plugin updates, who's taking care of the server, who's hosting it, who's monitoring security issues. If there is an issue with security, what needs to be done, and then who's monitoring. These are just figuring out, having a log of who's responsible for what, and that also helps keep things. These are just some of the frequent asked. This line up with frequent asked questions. So software and plugins won't update. That's one thing that can typically happen, and that's because your license might be out of date or not connected. So you definitely have to check for software updates. Make sure that the licenses are all valid in the plugin settings. If an element on your website isn't working properly or like it used to, or something is broken, then you would first try updating the plugins, check for any conflicts between the plugin and the current version of WordPress. And if all else fails, contact your technical support contact for somebody that's more of like a coder, a developer that can help you fix that issue. You can also contact plugin support, but that can be completely hit or miss if they're actually responsive or they're going to help. Emails not sending or receiving, reference who hosts your email and then contact them. That's definitely part of it, because a lot of times it can get confusing between who's hosting email and who's hosting the website. This one is much more common nowadays. So my email is going to spam. So with Office 365 especially, and the different programs that are installed for better email protection from security, for security reasons, notifications that get sent through contact forms and other forms on websites have frequently, more in the last year, been going to a spam folder or blocked completely. Our best solution so far has been using a transactional premium email service called Postmark, and then that makes it so that Postmark delivers those notifications and they do go through clear. That's been a solution. And then in other more extreme scenarios, we have to work with the IT company for to make sure that those are going through. So talking a little bit about the spam and a little bit about like a weekly task or monthly, just going in and filling out the forms on your website, or even a few of them, and just ensuring that they're going through seamlessly is definitely recommended way to go. All right. And if you get emails from people telling you there's problems with your SEO, problem with your site, you're going to get tons of solicitations. Just contact, if you're doing the annual checks and the security updates and things like that, you're way ahead of the game. These people aren't actually evaluating your site. They're just sending out mass emails. So it's always better to, if you do want to evaluate the site with your web provider from time to time, that's a better way to go than to responding to solicitations. If your site is ever not loading, the server's likely down. And that's how you know. So if your site's completely not loading, it's probably your host and you need to contact them. If you try to go to your website and you get some kind of like error message, then that's typically an error message. Like, you see there's like a URL string and it's saying like, something error is happening with WordPress, then that's a problem your web person has to address, and your host will not fix. Because if you go to a chat or a support ticket to the host for a website related issue, sometimes they'll take a while to get back to you, and then they're just going to tell you to contact your web design person anyway. If your site's suddenly loading very slowly, that's when you would run your site through GTmetrix and try to see why. It might also be a good time to check with your host and see what's going on. And because some of those hosts that cram too many sites onto servers will do that, and then during peak times of the day your site will be super slow, and during the slow times it'll be nice and fast. So if that's the case, if the busier time of the day, if you're a B2B company or a company that you expect all your traffic to be coming in from 9 to 5, and then that's when it's slow, you care much more about that time period than you do about 8 o'clock at night. So that would be where you start having to consider either an upgrade or a move to a different host, or try to determine what's going on. This one happens more frequently, less and less, luckily, because SSLs now kind of just auto renew. But if you ever go to your website and it says that can't connect to a secure connection, that's usually means that the SSL has expired and needs to be reinstalled. And the host can help with that, as well as your web company. But that's definitely becoming less and less frequent now that the SSLs are just being auto renewed. This has been one of the most common hacks I've seen most recently, is companies will go and put a redirect script on your site, so that when somebody tries to go to your site, it redirects to another site, and that means your site's hacked and it needs to be addressed and mitigated as soon as possible. And if one of the tricky ways they do this, so when you're doing your spot checking from time to time, is they make it so that this only happens for search traffic. So if somebody Googles your company and clicks the link, that's when they'll get redirected to a different site. If you go to it in the address bar directly, you don't. And that's what makes it hard to detect. So every now and then, just Google yourself and click on your own Google listing and just make sure nothing like that's happening. If you ever make a mistake, then you can undo your changes. There is revision history in WordPress, and then there's also If you're doing your regular backups, then it should be pretty easy to restore from one of those backups. We do offer this under our maintenance plan. We do all the things we've been mentioning. It's just the schedule's different. For most companies, the quarterly rotation is more than sufficient, and these are our different plans. We have Essentials is monthly. This is more just an automated watching things. Then we have Gold, where we log in quarterly and do all the things that we just talked about. And then for Platinum, we do $200 a month, and that's where we do things on a monthly basis opposed to quarterly. So that's kind of just a quick run through of everything you should be focused on doing. And there is a little Q&A spot in the bottom of the Zoom. If you have any questions, you can post it there. I did cover some of the frequently asked questions in that question spot, but if anybody has any questions, you can post them to the Q&A or the chat. Otherwise, the next steps, I'll close this out. This has been a recorded session, so I'll upload it to YouTube, send it out as a follow-up, as well as the document that we went over today of kind of those ongoing routine things that you're going to need to remember how to do. All right, so I'll just keep an eye out. Looks like we covered everything. So thanks again for coming today, and looking forward to helping you on your sites. And if there are any follow-up questions, please just send me an email. Thank you.